Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about The Boys Season 2, Episode 5. It's called We Gotta Go Now. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. Once again, we have a series of plot threads to run through here. Main one kind of being, involving Butcher, along with Huey and MM.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff with Homelander this episode, and possibly the show's goriest scene to date, which is saying something on this show. But
yeah,
my mouth was agape.
I only have really one criticism of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, God damn it! Why did that moment have to be in his head?
Wait, what?
The moment that's that's in Homelander's head, man. If that was real.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I kind of expected it not to be, but if anything, this is the one show I could have believed that maybe they actually might have pulled the trigger on that right
it
there
was
and then.
just it's plausible, right? That
Yeah.
he's on the tipping point of just snapping.
Well, let's start there then. Homelander's plot, which featured a little bit of Stormfront and some other things, but a lot of the Seven are on set for their new movie in this episode, and they're shooting stuff. Although it's kind of weird how they kind of announce things in the middle of a movie, because like A-Train's exit, for example, has kind of been written into the movie script, so that this is how they kind of show the audience that he's leaving. It's weird, but they have this leaked footage, right? Homelander went to some country to save people from this supervillain. I mean, I question how much of a villain. I'm not even sure what bad things the person was doing necessarily. We see him using some powers a little bit, but it's not like.
Do you know what? I'm willing to buy that he actually was doing bad things.
Okay.
I'm willing to buy that Homelander actually likes stopping villains. Like, he sees himself as the hero in that sense.
Oh, of course, I could buy that. But the guy's got like tornado-y powers or something. He's making things, sort of with gusts of wind flying around. And Homelander goes, "Oh, that's cute," and then just blasts him with heat vision right in the chest. Immediately drops him. He's like, "Well," and then just flies off. But then the person filming, because it's all like cell phone footage, the person then moves over, and then we see that he's actually the heat blast went through and hit a kid who was behind him, and it cuts back to this is like. He's watching it on a phone. He's with
Ashley's showing it.
Ashley's showing it to him, yeah. And Homelander's reaction to this, where he just goes, pfft, he makes this sort of face and just goes, "Oh, they're all starving, but they've got cell phones." Like, that's his reaction to it. And immediately, Ashley's terrified of the PR nightmare because Homelander wants to address this immediately.
There's even before you get to that, he's like, so what? We're down a point, and maybe 2, and she's like, 9.5. And he is horrified. That is the most scared of anything I've ever seen, in this entire show, is his reputation being down that much.
Yeah, which, bubbles up to this scene where he defies Ashley's wishes. Not, we know he doesn't care about them, but he defies Ashley's wishes, and he goes to, worth mentioning, both Malcolm and Gia from, what do you call it, Timeless, were both in this episode.
Malcolm was in it last season.
Yes. He
had a couple of key sequences over like 2 or 3 episodes, I think.
That's what he's doing here. He's on the PR team doing stuff.
Yeah. But he was in the like not therapy, but the one about the stories of how the supers had affected their lives. He was in one of those scenes as well. That was quite funny, if I recall. But it's funny seeing them both in this. It's like, oh yeah, another one's popped up.
Yeah, actually, I forgot to mention it because she was briefly in like a TV bit last episode. I just forgot to mention it because it was such a small, moment.
Yeah, but then both of them being here, and she had a more prominent role.
But she's on stage and she's with a protest, because that's the other thing he's horrified by. There's a protest. There's a protest against me, kind of thing.
I love that he is so horrified by this. And do you know what? I don't know how much of these elements of Homelander's personality were in the comics, because I know they've been pretty liberal with what they have and haven't taken. But it's hard not to draw parallels to a certain someone, isn't it? Fearing their reputation this much.
But he swoops in And immediately, because she's rallying the crowd and she's saying, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You know, these superheroes that can do whatever they want, blah, blah. Vought has all this. And he just sort of, you know, whoosh, poof, and lands, right? And immediately she is terrified of him, which I think is an interesting tactic, is that, you know, even on this stage where she's rallying against him, the fact that he's standing in front of her, immediately she's like, you know, shaking with fear almost. And he grabs the mic, he tries to do his generic, you know, pep talk. Well, accidents happen. Supervillains don't care about this like we do. So sometimes these things just happen. And immediately the response is, wait, has this happened before? How many times? Someone heckles from the crowd.
And then he's like, if you've served, you know, with our soldiers like I have, you'd understand that sometimes these things have to happen.
And then a soldier.
And of course, the soldiers pipes up, like, you don't speak for us. And that becomes the rallying chant. And
they all start, you know, cheering. He's giving him the finger. And you're kind of like, what's Homelander going to do here? Like, he's actively being just
mocked to his face.
Yeah, by a group of, you know, he's in this situation, and what's about to happen here is just in his head, and he kind of sense that it's going to be that. But part of me was like, what if this isn't? No, what if this? Because even this so far is already a big departure from season 1, where he was always kind of the golden boy in the news. As far as the public were concerned, he was this perfect superhero, and no one knew that it was anything shady going on outside of the close circle that were around him, where people had been affected by him. So already having this, where there's protests against him, the idea that even the public opinion is divided about him, is already kind of a big step away from where he was in season 1, which is fascinating. But the idea that he might just literally mow down a crowd of people with his heat vision in seconds, and that quick vision you get of it, where there's just charred dead bodies just everywhere from what he's done, is super dark. And it does cut back, and I'm not mad that it cut back, but
I'm like mildly disappointed, because I'd have loved to see the fallout. But and it's something like this show, you know, it's believable that at some point Homelander could just snap and do this.
I think something could happen in the vein of this.
Yeah.
At some point. Maybe that's how we end the season. Maybe, you know, this is kind of your tease for it. Like, hey, he almost did it. He's thinking about it. And, you know, like, and at what point, like, when he just sort of goes full dictator and says, look, no one can stop me, so everyone stop making fun of me, or I will kill you all. Like, what point does he just say that?
When does the self-restraint, because as terrible a person as he is, this arguably still counts as self-restraint. There's a point where that runs out, I think, for Homelander.
There is, although it's self-restraint because he cares what people think of him, not because he thinks it's the wrong thing to do necessarily.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Self-restraint, it does not imply the reasoning for said thing.
Yeah. And this actually makes him go crawling back, because Stormfront does have a scene where she's like, hey, you want my help? You know, I could be useful. And he goes, I don't need your help. But after this, he comes crawling back. It's particularly when he's watching footage of his own speech afterwards, and he's just sort of like, he's not crying, but he's getting really frustrated in this hallway.
What it reminded me from, I don't know if this was intentional, or it probably wasn't, but for whatever reason, the way this scene in the hallway was shot and his reactions, the angles, it was reminding me of something out of Joker.
Okay.
Like, I don't know why. Like, there was just something about the style of this scene in particular that felt like I was watching that movie.
It's probably the because he does do a lot of laughing in this scene, but it's obviously he's not earnest laughing. It's more maniacal, like I'm losing it laughter. So
it could be just that, but it was the way the camera was as well. I think it was just kind of adding up to a feeling of that.
Also, the little meta joke at the start about the recent rewrite from Joss, I thought was a fun little line.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the movie is called Dawn of Seven.
Yes, it is. Yes. So he goes to Stormfront for help, and you know, within minutes, because he kind of comes in just with his tail between his legs, just kind of asking for help, and we just cut to like she's showing him some memes later, like just basically trying to like promote the idea that he's a patriot and all these whiners are wrong, and you know, and obviously this does obviously tie in. This is a lot of, you know, social political commentary of the world today and the use of the internet when it comes to these type of ideas.
It's all about them dank memes. So,
you know, and almost immediately, like, because he comes back later after another scene she has with Starlight, and he's like, I'm up 5 points, and he's like, I owe you. And it's interesting because at this point he's actually, you know, he's came to her for help. He, at least right now, he likes his good guy image and he wants to maintain it. Now, admittedly, I do think there's a point where he'll stop caring about that, and that'll be very dangerous once he does. But but this is where we get to the big scene at the end where they have very, very rough superhero. Well, superheroes maybe not the right term. Super villain sex. Maybe superpowered sex. And I don't just mean that they're flying while thrusting and all the rest of it.
Although there's a little bit of that.
There's a little bit of that. I mean, it ends with that. But before that, she's really getting off and being blasted with heat vision.
Yeah, I think it's clear now her powers. Obviously, we know about the lightning, but she has some healing ability.
Yeah. She, I think her shouting the line, "Stop being a pussy, shoot my effing tits," I think was the...
Laser my effing tits.
Laser my effing tits, yes, and, that was the line.
I remember that because it's the one moment from the trailer that I don't think I even like properly watched. I think it was just on before something on Amazon at some point, and that stuck with me. I was like, okay, I'm excited for season 2 now, just from that moment.
Yeah. There was two lines like that in this episode for me. The other one was Butcher's auntie, the F pig, the F piggy or whatever she called the plushie, the dog has sex with. That also cracked me up. But no, I mean, this seems very visceral. I think what's notable here in terms of power dynamics is that A, he's excited by the fact that someone can take his heat blast, I think, but 2, he gets down on her. We don't see her going down on him, and I do think there's something to be said there about choosing to show that and not the other way around.
I think it's in keeping with him wanting a new mother figure.
God, what? I mean, I know you're saying that, but come on.
I think it's very important to note that she is replacing Stillwell in a lot of ways, except he doesn't have to be restrained.
Replacing Stillwell, but I think also importantly to add that she also actually has the power to enforce like whatever she has to, because Stillwell tried to keep him under control, and she's not necessarily keeping him under control per se, but arguably is manipulating him or keeping him under her own like agenda. She can actually enforce it. She has something to fight back with. She can take the hits and keep on coming. No pun intended. So I don't know. This is the romance from hell forming. Like, these two characters, the most awful, vile, like human beings on the planet, are forming a power couple, and none of us are safe because of it.
Yeah, and Stormfront doesn't have like tons in this episode of her own stuff.
No, she feeds into his plot, and she also feeds into a subplot with Starlight.
Yeah, but one of the only moments that really stood out for her individually is one where she is very, very racist with A-Train without saying anything explicitly, but it's so clear, and the undercurrent, and he's picking up on it as well. Don't get me wrong.
I don't know if I feel that the lens she was going to make her point clear, I think there's a grey area between saying explicitly and it being subtext. I don't think it's had subtext at any point.
No, it's not. But she doesn't say any. She doesn't use any explicitly racist words or phrases directed at him.
No, she just stares at him while sipping her milkshake, saying, "Oh, I used to be a member of that church, but the deleting garbage people know what I mean." Stare.
Yeah. It's very, very clear that, like I say, it is not being subtle, and that's okay. She's terrible. I'm fine with that.
I think it is probably a smart move to kind of address the idea of how she feels about A-Train, because they've not interacted up until now, at least from what I remember.
And it makes you wonder how much of A-Train leaving was Homelander and how much of it was her.
Yeah.
And it makes me question as well, what the hell does Edgar have on her? Right? Because, he's a minority that she clearly should despise based on everything, yet is seemingly working for him.
Did they specifically say that she was handpicked by him, or just like the higher ups? Like, was it specifically him?
No, she mentioned his name specifically. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Because it was when she appeared doing the Instagram live as they were filming, and I think that was the first episode. And Homelander was like, "Who approved this?" And she was like, "Oh, that would be Mr. Edgar," and being all smug about it.
Yeah, we had that scene. I suppose the stuff with Starlight we'll sort of pivot into next, where it really boils down to, because she actually disappears for a lot of the episode. She's there early on. They're doing some of these cheesy, these movie scenes, right, where they have the glowing lighting, and I was actually cackling at the start because they were forcing all of this kind of like dialogue into Maeve's mouth, where she was sort of making this speech about being gay, and it was so like
terrible
propaganda, corporate speak. It was all this stuff, and you could tell she hated having to say it all, and that she doesn't want this much attention on her life. And obviously that becomes clearer later on when she's with the girlfriend, and they're trying to like force her into like saying the right things and wearing the right things and all this. Back to that in a minute. So, but the reason why I'm thinking of this is because I remember Homelander praising this scene and saying girls get it on, and Ashley has to correct him and says no, girls get it done.
And I think Homelander goes in private.
But clearly not super happy. It does acknowledge that obviously Starlight is maybe unsuccessfully keeping an eye on Stormfront, in the sense that Stormfront's noticed she's been staring and things like that, and is
yes, I believe the phrase was "you've been eye-effing me all day."
Yeah, but she gets really upset because Stormfront ends up talking to her mother. She walks into the cafeteria area and sees her with her mother, and gets really upset about this. And obviously it's almost like a threat, especially since it becomes clear throughout the episode that Stormfront knows that Annie leaked the compound V.
It's clear enough in this scene where she says, someone was angry enough to leak it, and just like she did with A-Train, just stares at Annie.
Yeah. In fact, I even think she says, I wonder who that could have been. Or there was a line like that as well. It was like really
was something.
It was as blatant as you could possibly get. And later on, much later in the episode, Starlight goes into her trailer and is sort of rummaging through, trying to get into her computer. Is caught, but she kind of plays it quite wisely by sort of pretending to be there because she's angry about the mother thing, and says, don't you try and patch me and my mother up. Like, that's not your place. Stay away. But then it turns into a conversation about the compound V. And Starlight even kind of threatens her a little bit. She makes her eyes flicker and the lights start to go.
And Storm was just like, oh, cute.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, this is how you want to play it.
Yeah. So she's in a bit of a predicament. It's almost the same predicament that A-Train was in with her. Now she's in it with because Stormfront says she's got something planned for her. She's going to be useful or something like that, she says. And she's like, what does that mean? But then Homelander shows up, so they have to kind of like pretend to be playing nice, and she walks off. But intrigued by that. But I really did enjoy Annie calling her out on her racism, and obviously Stormfront gives her the bullshit kind of response, because she's saying, oh, you betrayed your own people, and Annie, of course, knowing who she is and knowing what she's done, says, what, you mean white people? So no, don't be racist, Annie. I mean superheroes. But it's clear what she meant, and this episode successfully makes Stormfront somehow even worse than she was before, and makes it feel like she's got Starlight in a predicament, which obviously makes us worry, which is drama.
Yeah, I think Stormfront has been the standout hit of the season that surprised me in how interesting she is as a character. In the same way Homelander is terrible person, but a great character to watch and just see everything play off them, and the two of them together especially. The way they play off each other is just so good to watch.
Yeah, and they've been through a nice variety of interactions until this point. And we mentioned Maeve, and that I'll bring that back up because the one key thing that comes out of the conversation after the PR meeting about
she goes out to, she says to Ashley in the PR, it's like, hey, I'll handle this, but she goes out to Elena and is like, you've got to just go along with this. Homelander will kill you if you don't.
Yeah, but ultimately she ends with saying, because Elena's like, what are we going to do? And Maeve kind of makes a choice here. She makes a stance and says, we're going to take him down. And that's the first time that anyone, I think, on the Seven, or anyone like with any real knowledge of, obviously Butcher's been wanting to take him down, but it's always felt kind of hopeless. Like how are you going to do it, Butcher?
Yeah,
like, what's your plan?
Annie's been like the one on the inside, but she doesn't, like, Maeve seems on a totally different power level to Annie, right?
Well, you think she's more powerful than Annie?
I do. She definitely comes across that way. I don't know if it's just the seniority.
Yeah, I don't know if there is necessarily. I mean, I have no idea what power levels are. I never got the impression she was that much more powerful. I got the impression that both of them think that Homelander can kill them if he wants to, so they're both scared of him.
No, I think he very much can. Don't get me wrong. I think on this ladder, Homelander is far above either of them. But I do feel like she at least projects with more confidence than Annie does. And maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, I've not really gotten any of that to suggest that her power levels are any higher, but I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme, because I think what's important here is that the character makes a choice that she intends on somehow taking him down, and she probably doesn't quite know how yet, although there is one thing she does later in the episode to sort of maybe give us a tease, but she makes a choice to no, I'm not going to be scared anymore. Now that I'm pushed into a corner where the person I love is in this much danger, I'm going to just make a choice to fight back. No more hiding and running and watching what I'm saying.
And it feels inevitable at some point she'll end up on the same side as our gang and Annie at some point, through circumstance, or maybe there's some active recruitment that happens, but it feels inevitable.
Yeah, I feel like circumstances are going to end up fumbling into each other, and we're going to end up with some sort of impromptu team up at some point. But yeah, and it's interesting that she's now tackling it this way without even because she's doing this separately. It's not like Annie knows that Maeve is now trying to plot against Homelander. These are things that are happening separately. And it'll be interesting once all the heroes realize, and when I say heroes, I mean our heroes, our characters that we're rooting for, once they all realize, wait, there's multiple pockets of us trying to achieve essentially similar things.
Yeah, I would not be shocked if the season ends with the other heroes coming out against Homelander, and that's how essentially Stormfront takes his place in the Seven, and that's how the new status quo, and they don't realize, Annie aside, that she's as bad.
It's interesting to me that A-Train, who opened this show with killing someone because he was high and ran through someone and, obliterating them on impact,
is one of the morally best of the Seven.
Well, I was going to say more sympathetic, in that there's several points in this, that conversation with Stormfront where I'm rooting for him in this conversation, and then when he's with the shitty director / PR guy and he wants to change some of the dialogue, I mean, it feels a little bit desperate because he's trying to leave it open-ended.
just like, hey, we don't have to make this the official announcement.
But the scene where he actually shoots his speech, right, and we get to hear the speech about him saying, it's time for him to stop running and let the sun go down on his time in the Seven.
It sounded like a Fast and the Furious speech.
Afterwards, he there's a moment where the director was like, hey, do you want another take? If you don't feel comfortable, I was like, no, it's fine, that'll do. And it was like, okay, great, and just moves on. He never really cared. And I actually thought the performance within the performance, which you could sort of see behind the faking of the lines, what he was really feeling about saying it, was quite good. So there's a sympathy there that's building with him that is impressive, given kind of the focus that he had back in early season 1, which was mostly he was the screw up.
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels similar to what they've been trying to do with the Deep, but I think more effective.
Similar. Well, I think now, because we have a clearer vision of both of them, they actually feel quite far away to me, because the Deep, it's clear he's learned nothing. Everything to him is just about presenting things so that he can get what he wants. With A-Train, I'm actually starting to think that he might get redemption. That he's actually maybe going to grow. I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll, somehow.
I kind of like the idea that maybe he doesn't. But he's still a pretty shitty person, and he's just not as shitty.
Well, no, I kind of see, because effectively he's a junkie, right? Or he was a junkie, and I think the idea of being that he's gotten clean, perhaps, or he will get clean, and he will start to atone for things he did when he was under the influence, and when he was, on the Compound V, in the way that he was. I think that's a potentially interesting, in the way a lot of the stories in this show parallel real world issues. That's something that we could certainly see with him, where he does actually overcome that and becomes better because of it. And could it be interesting that at some point down the line he ends up saving Huey, for example, and what sort of weird relationship could blossom from that because of what he did? I mean, that could be a very powerful thing. If Huey in some way, maybe forgives is a strong word, but especially given that Huey's whole thing, and we've been talked about before, is that he won't go down the path of just being obsessed with vengeance like Butcher is.
Yeah, to have the literal forgiveness of his, his Homelander in this scenario. It could be interesting. It
could be very powerful. So I see potentially great things cooking with A-Train. And given that he's now officially essentially out of the seven, like what they do with him now is very intriguing. Now, admittedly, we've not really seen him do anything because he sees bad things happen to other people yet. Everything's just kind of about himself, and he's sympathetic enough, to a point. But I think the real turning point is when we see him kind of make a moral choice for the betterment of someone else, rather than just because he's upset that he's losing everything the way he is. So that could be intriguing. Anyway, so to jump into the main batch of characters who we've kind of saved for last year just by accident, Butcher is pretending he's okay. He's not telling anyone else anything. Huey calls him and he lies to him. But Huey, in a real kind of... Do you know, I mean, obviously I had the obvious Joss Whedon reference earlier, but this was very reminiscent to me in Serenity, when they know that there's something wrong, it's a trap, because Anara and Mal don't fight in the phone call, where he walks up to him and says, I think something's wrong with Butcher. He's like, why? He was nice to me. And MM's like, what did he say exactly? Like immediately, he's just like, what did he say? And through some detective work, basically the squeaky toy noise that he heard over the phone, they find him, because he keeps talking about his boy, and I was like, wait, Butcher's got a son? What's going on? And it's his dog.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. And he bought him a squeaky Homelander because he wants his dog to screw Homelander, which is
it's very on brand, isn't it?
What he does at the end of the episode. So I thought it was a really intriguing way to take Butcher's story, and because we were speculating last episode about various permutations of what they could do with them going forward after the story he had with Becca last episode, and I think the idea that he's kind of this person who needs other people, and that Huey and MM show up for him and say, I don't care how much of a dickhead you're going to be about it, we're not leaving, and we're not letting you just fade into misery. Because, I mean, the episode opens with him just picking a fight in a bar. I felt sorry. He was a big guy, but he was just dancing and enjoying his music, and Butcher just comes up and starts beating the shit out of him for no reason. Just because he wants to be beat up.
Because Butcher's a bit of a dick.
But I think there was a lot of heart in this story. The story of him realizing what Hugh is for him, and we even get to hear, about his younger brother who's not with us anymore, right?
Lenny, I think.
Yeah. The auntie talks about how Lenny was a lot like Huey, funnily enough, and he was this, skinnier, more nervous guy who did have forgiveness in him. We hear this story about Butcher almost killing someone who hurt his little brother, but his little brother's the one who pulled him away and said, no, it's fine, look, we're done.
And they were quite young at this point. I can't remember what year, but they were still in school.
They were still school kids, yeah. But the idea being that this has always been the way, and that he needs the canary, he needs the moral compass. And
yeah,
I think it's interesting Huey and MM both kind of being aware of this and kind of being there for him. Actually, in the same way that it was very uplifting to have Butcher step in for Huey a couple of episodes ago when Homelander was there, and indeed again in this episode later on, is that idea of like a real camaraderie forming where, we've been talking a lot about Butcher and like how you might have this darker ending where he's the example of what happens when you don't give up vengeance, but they're doing a really good job of playing this fine line where they're really giving him a lot of heart and a lot of like, you know what, even if he makes the wrong choice, I'll be sad because there's enough good in him now that I want to root for him.
You want to root for him to do the right thing. And
I feel like, and it's stupid to make predictions because every episode they add on more layers to him and it makes it almost irrelevant, but my best prediction at this point is he will go out doing something truly noble. He will probably go out like dying for everyone else or Huey, but he will do it with a healthier like decision, and not like in this episode where he essentially just wants to be killed because he has nothing left to live for. That's just because Huey calls him out and he's like, what, do you think I've thought about just throwing in the towel? We should explain the setup here. So Black Noir shows up outside. Butcher spots him. He's like, he's here for me.
I love the way it was filmed, just in the car mirror.
Yeah, he's just on the roof. He's just creeping over the edge.
Just creeping over. Yeah. It was very funny looking.
Just waiting for nightfall, and they're trying to form some plans, set a trap, like Home Alone, but less cute, as Huey put it. And it's this kind of standoff thing where Butcher just wants to, like, you know what, he's here for me, I'll go and like buy some time, you guys can leave and he can kill me, essentially is his attitude. And it's actually very uplifting to see Huey saying, no, F you, we're not just going to leave you to die, no. He stands his ground. And again, we've been talking about how MM kind of backing Huey up. Like, I love that moment here in this scene where it's like, he doesn't move, and Butcher's like, don't make me, move you out the way. And just walks around the corner. He's not been in the scene at all. Just walks around the corner and says, well, if you get through him, good luck with me. And it's kind of like, there's a real, like, I think the early first season, and I like the first season a lot, but the early part of the first season, I think there was maybe a slight issue with the group being fun to be around, and they had the whole Space Girls thing, but there wasn't necessarily an actual heart to the camaraderie of them. I think season 2, what I've loved about it so far in these last 3 episodes, is that it's making me actually care about them as a family unit.
No, I agree. I think it worked in season 1 because they were reluctantly dragged back into it. Mm-hmm. So you get a while of that feeling of they haven't got a heart because they don't feel like a unit, right? Whereas now they do. So it is important that we have this camaraderie, and we definitely have it at this point.
Yeah. I'm surprised with how much I felt. This is what we said in season 1 as well, though. There's a lot more heart than we ever expected this show to have. And it's what really makes it as good as it is, on top of the gore and all the other stuff. But
yeah, I'm sure we compared it to this in season 1, but it's very much like Kick-Ass and.
Oh, we definitely. I remember talking about that in episode 1.
It's very much. It's taken some extremely edgy source material and given it heart in the adaptation.
Which reminds me, talking about stuff that was in season 1. Got pulled up in the comments last week.
Yes, we did. Because
Homelander definitely knew about Compound V, which I said I'm pretty sure he did. But
you did? No, that's true.
Yeah, there was a whole plot about it last season.
There was. They told us there was in the recap, which I don't know what it is about me and recaps. Streaming services do not give me goddamn recaps.
Yeah, every episode of The Boys this season has a recap now that's weekly.
Oh no, I get that. I get the 30-second recap, but I don't get the full season recaps for whatever reason.
Yeah. But anyway, so Black Noir does come in, and it is, it's this thing where he tells the others to go, he stays back to fight. I mean, obviously he's got no chance because Black Noir is a super villain, right? Or superhero, or super powered, whatever you want to call him. And there's kind of an uplifting moment where Comes in and takes some shots at him, and does notably hit him a couple of times before Black Noir hits him with like a throwing star or something, and he goes down.
Yes, and the bullets do obviously nothing.
Oh, they do nothing, yeah, but he does hit him. And the reason why I'm pointing that out, because there's a sort of almost a sly little joke in here, despite the fact that it's very good drama and tension, is that a second later, Huey comes in the exact same way, fires the gun like 3 times, but doesn't hit him once. I thought that was a nice little touch. A nice little touch.
MM's a professional.
Yes. But there's this beautiful moment, and it was set up before, this idea that he wouldn't let anything happen to his brother, where he says, don't you touch Huey, right? And then he brings out that I've got photos of the secret. And this is where Huey and of course, find out about a lot of the details they didn't know yet, which is the son, the way Becca's been held captive. And he tells me, look, a lot of effort went into keeping this secret, and if you touch any of us, but he really emphasizes Huey, which is what really gave it this thing. It's this idea that he wasn't willing to talk about or admit any of this to anyone through all the episode, but the second someone was about to hurt Huey and he's like, no, I'm doing it. And this is what gives him heart, where he's such a dick most of the time. But this gives him layers. This gives him depth.
Does. And also he's likable because he gives them all stupid, terrible nicknames like Gimp C.
Yeah. And so we have this scene where the deal is kind of made and Black Noir's called off. And
I actually really found this intriguing because obviously, this just shows us how much Noir is Egda's lapdog, right? For lack of a better phrase.
I mean, loyal, company man, I suppose, if you like.
Yeah, but it's very much he feels in a similar way to what I feel about Stormfront, and he's reporting directly to him. He's working for him. He's got his own agenda that he's running, and Homelander feels more and more like the odd one out of the higher ups in the group, where he's just the unpredictable one that we have to just kind of contain. He's not in on anything, unlike these. So because Edgar's watching through the body cam and phones him, and what's his ringtone? I remember laughing at the ringtone. I'm pretty sure it was like a choir going Hallelujah. It wasn't the song Hallelujah, but it was like a. It was the Hallelujah handle. There you go. Classical piece. Yeah. As opposed to the Jeff Buckley Hallelujah, which is the point I was trying to get across. Yeah. But I think it's handled.
Although, given that was in the Snyder Cut trailer, that would have been funny on its own as well.
It would have been too late, unfortunately.
But yeah, so yeah, and so when Butcher's leaving, he says goodbye to his dog, gives him the Homelander doll to screw. When he's leaving with the others, it feels like no, he's back on board to help lead this team because they need him, and he's doing it
more than he has at any point all season.
Yeah, and it feels like he's doing this now not for him but for them and for the world, or for for the right and wrong of it.
It's the first time it feels
not selfish.
Healthy.
Yeah, or healthy. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because before it's all been very personal, revenge. Becca. It's been this obsession, this very personal drive that has been very unhealthy. Whereas now it feels like maybe it's not for all the right reasons. Maybe it's not to save society. I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's there, but it's more, my mates need me, which is definitely a step up.
Yeah, which is a big step up. It feels more selfless, and it feels, again, like there's heart. It feels like he's doing the right thing. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure he'll make many a dodgy call. He will do a lot of things in the wrong way.
He's still Butcher after all.
He's still Butcher, but this felt like, no, he's going with them to help with this, not because it's for his own purpose. Because arguably, everything he's done, he ropes everyone in and convinces them it's the right thing to do. He convinces them for all these reasons, for their own sake. But ultimately, it's all been about getting back to Becca. And I think it's actually fascinating now that they've taken that goal away from him, and now he's doing it more as a... Because this is the thing, at the start of the episode when he's getting drunk in the bar and he picks that fight, like, he's had this singular goal for years. He's literally been working towards one thing, and he kind of achieved it, but then it was... I don't want to say thrown back in his face, that's maybe a bit unfair, but you know what I mean? It was...
Expectation, reality did not live up to expectation.
Yeah, it was flipped upside down, and ultimately he's left aimless and like he has nothing to live for. And it's like throughout this episode, he realised that he does have something to live for, even if it is just Huey and
he's got a family.
Yeah, and there's heart in that. So once again, I am pleasantly surprised in how much heart this show has, and not even just how much it has, but how well it pulls it off as well. Like, both this moment where he sticks up for Huey, and it's just like the moment where he did it with Homelander. Both of them left me going, F yeah, like inside. I was like,
I think just talking about it kind of does it a bit of a disservice, because it feels very by the numbers. Well, of course he does that, right? Of course that's the beat.
Yeah, we should really make this clear that, like, by the time they go up from this like safety room in the basement, like, the place has been scorched. Like, Black Noir's like terrorized it, and then they're all clearly about to die. They're all hurt. They're all on the floor. They're all screwed. And the Black Noir's walking towards Huey with his blade or whatever it is. Like, the whole thing is done. Like, it is helpless. They are absolutely done. And Huey's first up to be killed, and that's the moment where he
steps in.
Yeah.
And again, it's reminiscent of a few episodes ago with Homelander in the sewers.
Yeah. So, which is why the opposite, and two examples in this episode, which is Huey standing up to him for his own good, right, is kind of not the exact same type of thing, but it's the same idea that this is what he can do for him. And then almost literally the same thing, but although much less successful, as him, running in with the gun, trying to save him.
The heart was in the right place.
Yeah, exactly. Heart was in the right place. Now, I know we said to save that for last. Don't worry, I remembered while we were talking about that. There's still two things to talk about.
Yeah, there's
one is
Frenchie and Kimiko.
And Maeve. Obviously, we talk about Maeve stuff on our own, but she does go to see the Deep at the end of the episode. We should mention just the little snippets we get on TV of the Deep being married, stuffing his face with cake.
He's now the spokesperson celebrity face of the cult.
Yeah, the ad, this is the one that A-Train's watching, that sparks the conversation about the church with Stormfront, is that he basically, like, he does this really cheesy thing where he's like, I'm the church, the church of
Church of the Collective, because I remembered it finally, because and I found out the reason why I've been struggling to remember is it's such a terrible name. It's a meaningless name. That's why it's effective in this sense. It makes perfect sense, but it's why it was so hard to remember.
But he's walking down like the halls of a school. He's like, you know what? It's made me a better man. The kind of man who wants to, call out bad behavior. And there's like a guy and a girl, and the guy's kind of like kissing her, and she's saying, "No, stop." And the Deep just goes, "Hey, that's not cool, man," and just keeps walking. And I'm like,
yeah.
What?
It's terrible.
But it's so the surface level kind of attempt here to try and show that he's better. And then he walks past two kids fighting. He's like, "Hey, break it up, guys!" And the two kids just stop fighting. the whole thing just comes across as so vapid and shallow.
And it's elements like this that show the show's really strong style in its ability to mimic real culture and in a heightened way. But like this, the when they're shooting the movie at the start, exactly what it's doing from the very first second before it tells you. It's got the big orangey brown muddy filter on it, and you go, oh, I see what they're doing visually. Immediately it's just like, I get it.
Yeah, it's just straight up satire, and I think it's interesting in this episode. I mean, we always suspected that Maeve would ultimately be kind of on Team Good Guys, but we're officially kind of on that path. And I think A-Train now is kind of a realistic candidate for maybe being an ally at some point.
He's a bit of a loose cannon, potentially.
Yeah. So, obviously, I don't expect Black Noir, and I think the Deep's just a selfish prick. But that said, Maeve does show up. He's giving out free books to homeless, and they're like, they said there was going to be food. Like, this is food for the soul.
That might have made me laugh more than anything else in the episode.
But Maeve comes in. Actually, no, I thought this was funnier. As Maeve comes in, and he tries to hug her. She's like, no, and he's like, oh, do you want a book? And she's like, F no. Like that her reaction to that made me laugh. But she's like, hey, I need a favor, and hey, if you really want to get back out of the seven, it may be helpful if there's a woman on the team who maybe just tells people you're not a complete piece of shit. And so obviously she's going to use him to like whatever plan she now has with Homelander. But he says, wait, you think I'm a piece of shit? F yeah.
Just so blunt. It's like, obviously, don't even think about it for a second.
So that's cooking away, so we have to mention that. And then of course I teased the gore thing, so we have to talk about the Frenchie and Kimiko plot. And there's not really that much plot here outside of he's following her, she kills a bunch of mobsters. We'll come back to the actual kills aside. And it turns out she's actually working for the girlfriend. She's giving her like hit jobs, and Frenchie kind of breaks down, tries to talk her out of it. Kimiko does cry a little bit. She uses sign language, it's her own language, right? That she made up with her brother.
Was it? I don't recall. I don't know if it was just sign language, if it was hers.
Well, I can't tell the difference.
No, I can't either.
But they pointed out in the last couple of episodes, I think it was episode 2 where he's talking to the brother, they talk about the fact that she made up her own sign language that only he knows. Enough. And that's why he wants her to teach him. So I assumed it was her own.
You're probably right. And I actually really like that beat where at the end, she's very angrily signing at him. And I appreciate we're getting the subtitles, at least for that. Although I actually would have understood if they'd chosen not to subtitle that one for us, just to make us feel like...
Yeah, because no one understands her. We have to just take it as what we see. And
try and interpret her that way. But him just kind of breaking down, it's like, I don't understand you because you won't teach me. And he's so frustrated that he's trying to communicate with her all the time. He's trying to have this relationship, and she's just not letting him in.
Yeah, and he gets angry and says F you and storms off, and she storms off. So they're in kind of a rough place right now. They're very separate from the rest of the episode, of course. But yeah, we have to talk about this. So when she goes and kills the mobsters, like the ones afterwards feel visceral, but that first one where because I thought she was going to rip off his ear, right? That's what I thought she was doing.
At first, I thought she was just going to snap the neck, to be honest.
Yeah, but she had to hold of the ear. I thought she was going to rip off the ear because it's going to be grisly, because this show likes to be grisly. She rips off his entire face, and you see the whole thing. It is... My jaw was on the floor.
What I like about this, I mean, amongst many other little things I like about this, I'm a sucker for a good flaying. What can I say? I like that it wasn't the whole face. I like that it kind of went across like in a strip. Like it wasn't like a neat, oval shape that came off like, as if you're peeling off a mask. It was like just this strip across the middle of the face. That made it even more effective. Just a little detail of it, that there was still like skin that I could see on either side of all the flesh that made it work so much better. The
rest of the scene when she was still fighting the others and killing them, my mouth...
She took quite a few bullets as well.
Yeah. My mouth was just like the entire time. I almost did that thing where I kind of looked around the room as if I was looking for like a crowd to like, someone look at my reaction. Someone see my reaction.
Yeah.
Like I was looking around like, Firefly, look at me. Notice my reaction. I'm in shock here.
It was intense, and I love it. And more, please.
Oh sure. I mean, this shows her. I mean, it was episode 2 when they're going after the brother. The guy in the back room of the costume store, that was really violent.
Yeah,
There's been some gory stuff so far, so no.
It's not afraid to pull these moments. I appreciate Amazon letting them do this, because I can see places understandably feeling squeamish about this and not want it, because obviously streaming services, they kind of get away with whatever rating they do. I mean, there is an official rating, don't get me wrong, but it's all kind of just there. It's not like it's age gated in the same way. You have to go into a shop and buy something, right? And they can check your ID. So I think that there is a little bit of a bravery to, just be like, no, we're gonna support the creators and just go for it.
Although for the record, most services you can put like a password or anything.
You can put a child lock on,
anything above a certain rate.
But
so I think
let's be realistic. Anyone who's 12 or 13 or knows how to get around.
Oh sure, but the point I'm making though is that's why I think there's probably a couple of political reasons as well, but I think that's one of the reasons why they go out their way to make sure they all have ratings, so that they can have that sort of functionality where someone can theoretically just blanket say, okay, R-rated content's off the table.
Yeah, I'm assuming there's a legal reason for it as well as just political. Like,
I don't know. Well, that's the weird thing. At least in the UK, for the longest time, digital on demand did not actually have to be certified by the BBFC, and I think it changed at some point, but there was a while where it didn't have to be. It kind of got around it was like a loophole because all this new services like weren't there when they made up all the rules. So
yeah, there's a reality that technology moves faster than the law. It's just a fact, and it can't keep up.
But I mean, keep in mind in the US, like actual physical Blu-rays and DVDs don't have to have ratings displayed at all.
No, they don't have them displayed.
And they literally have releases that are unrated. They promote them as such. Whereas in the UK or other countries, they still have to get rated. And that's kind of the you're saying that it's not unrated because it's that extreme that no one would give it a rating. It's unrated because they didn't submit it for rating. There's a difference.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, it's brutal, and the face peeling was wonderful.
Love it.
As was we didn't really talk about the actual shot of the bird's eye shot of the heat vision going through the crowd in like a big sort of almost S shape, which might even be a bit of a
intentional
jab. Thing. And it's funny because we compare this a lot. I think in season 1 we talked a lot about comparing this to your Batman v Superman. The idea that this is actually a good satire of superheroes with awful versions of the characters that actually has a lot of heart, of course, but is a good satire that has something to say.
Yeah, and something else that I think we should commend Amazon for is it's, as much as it's a satire on superheroes and those things, it is a satire on capitalism and huge corporations having all this power. And it's hard not to think of Amazon as a key example of one of those corporations.
Just you wait. We're going to meet the real boss next season, and he's going to be named Jeff Bezos. Just you watch.
Yeah, obviously. But I appreciate that it would be easy for a company like Amazon to just be like, you're not saying this on our service, given that it could very easily be construed as, against them. So I appreciate that they allow it still. It's, again, it is their service. It's their right to say, no, we don't want you saying this on our thing.
Oh, for sure. But they've not shied away from anything really in the past, I don't think. So,
no.
There you go. So, yeah, maybe we'll actually see Homelander actually outright mass murder a bunch of people. He's chosen not to save people in the past, but it seems like we're bubbling up to it.
Once we get to the point where if his reputation is unsalvageable, I mean,
to be fair, it is bouncing back right now. So
it is right now, but if it gets to a point where it's unsalvageable, does it hit a point where he's just like, well, screw it, what have I got to lose?
Yeah, so I do appreciate that at least by the halfway point now it's really changing, because one of the things I was concerned about in episode 1 was that it felt like they were kind of resetting things back to the status quo, but I feel like since episode 3 onwards it's really kicked into what season 2 actually is, and this in particular for Homelander is a big change in status quo, that we're even dealing with the idea that some people are starting to turn against him. So
yeah, the idea of Homelander having this identity crisis, it's great stuff.
But there you go, that is episode 5 of The Boys. So let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Please do like and subscribe. Liking is super important on YouTube. It is the easiest and free way to support us and make sure all the content keeps coming and shows that you're enjoying it and you want it to keep coming. You can, of course, also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your troubles. Maybe one day we'll make enough to fund a cure for chronic hiccups.
That would be lovely.
Not really. I'm sure I'll have like a PS7 to buy or something by that point.
How dare you?
Connor can hiccup till he's grave.
I mean, it's already been like 10 years. I mean,
he's just it's fine. So yeah, go over to Patreon. You can also catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?